Hello, this is Dr. Grafton, and in this video, we're going to be discussing assignment 3.4, chapter 8, confidence interval estimation. The objective of this assignment is to apply some Excel functions to calculate confidence intervals for a population mean and a proportion. So there's two parts to this assignment. Uh, when we're doing confidence intervals, we're looking at sample data and we're trying to report what the point estimate might be and see where that interval might be when we're trying to estimate the population parameter from a sample. So we've talked about this before, where we take samples because the population might be too big to look at every element of that particular population. So what we're looking at is with some level of confidence, we can say within this sample, we can find the population mean. In this case, we're talking about it being a point estimate. It also helps us to quantify the amount of uncertainty in that point estimate. Okay. And so the narrower the confidence interval, the increases the amount of certainty that we might have that the sample represents the population as a whole. So the first part of the exercise in an Excel, we're going to calculate a 95% confidence interval for the mean number of days it takes Repco customers as a combined group to pay their bills. We're going to do the same for each customer size. So you'll see in the spreadsheet here in a second where we got a small, medium, and large customer size. We're going to do a side-by-side box plot for days for the three separate sizes. And then we're going to do a confidence interval calculating the suggested problems with the validity of that confidence interval. Okay. And then you can see there's a couple questions there to answer. One of the things you'll also see is that box plot actually gets us pretty close to what we're going to calculate in the confidence interval. So it's an interesting tool to use to at least to start with. The second part of the assignment then is we're going to be using Excel to calculate a 95% confidence interval for the proportion of all customers who pay bills within 15 days. So again, we're going to be using some Excel functions to do that. We'll be calculating that interval of the differences between the proportion of large customers who pay within 15 days and similar proportion of medium-sized customers, and then calculating that 95% confidence interval. And again, as with all the assignments, once you've done the calculations in the spreadsheets, then we want you to comment on your findings and point out things that you see that might be meaningful as a data analyst to that. Okay. All right. So let's look at the spreadsheet. Now, we see it's a list of customers. There's, I believe, 91 customers, 90 or 91 customers. We see their customer sizes, large, small, medium. We see the number of days and paying their bills, and of course, then we see the amount. So it lists all this information. So the first thing we want to do is let's get a box plot, and we're going to do customer size by days. So we highlight those two columns, do our Control Shift down arrow, and it highlights all the way down to row 92. So it looks like there's 91 customers that we're dealing with here. We go up to Insert. On this icon here, it says Insert a Statistic Chart. Click on that down arrow. You got histogram, and you got box and whisker plot. Okay. We can title the chart. This is days by customer size. We're going to come back to this box chart after we do some calculations, but you can see it gives you the whiskers are the low extreme and the high extreme. The box itself then shows you where the majority of them are at. If you highlight, this is I'm putting it right at the X there. It tells you the for large it's 18.1. For small it says 19.375, and then for medium it it says 20.4871. So we'll come back and look at those here in a minute, but that gives you a pretty good representation of maybe what this might be when we actually do the calculations. So across the bottom, I in the spreadsheet that I created for you to download, I put tabs that will answer each of the questions, and we'll start with the confidence interval for a mean. So this is for a population mean. I put the confidence interval as 95%. So the first thing we want to look at is a sample size. So it's equal. We're going to count, and we're going to go to the data table. So this is telling the Excel to go to the first tab that we created. And we want it to go from D2 to D92. And basically that's counting the size of the sample. So there's your 91. We want the sample mean. We're just going to do average. Again, go back telling it to look at the data tab, C2 to C92. Okay. Um, so that gives us our mean that's for the full sample. That's not breaking it down yet by customer size. Our standard deviation then is equal STDEV dot S, and that's for sample. And we're going to go back to the data tab again for our formula. C2 to C92. That gives us our standard deviation. Now we want the standard error or the mean. So we're going to be using the data that we've created here. So this equals B6 divided by the square root of B4. Okay. And degrees of freedom, which we're going to need for our formula that we're going to come up with the confidence interval then, is basically 1 minus the sample size. Okay. So now our formula then, we're using a two-tailed inverse t-test. This is will give us the multiplier that we're going to need to be able to subtract for the upper and lower limits. Okay. So it's equal t dot inverse dot 2t. Okay. And then it's going to want us to tell us what the probability is, and then what the level of significance is, or level of significance could be also considered degrees of freedom, which is B8. So you'll see that as we go through that. So we want 1 minus, and I'm going to go ahead and make this a static, an absolute. So it's got the $sign B, $2. Okay, so that's our significance there. And then B8. That's our degrees of freedom. So our confidence level up here that we're talking about is our probability. That's what we're putting into that formula there. Okay, so that gives us our multiplier. So now to give us our lower limit equals B5 minus B9 times B7. Okay, and then give us our upper limit equals B5 plus B9 times B7. Okay. So we can leave these at that amount there. We can format the numbers, create a number with 2 decimal places. Okay. It makes it a little easier to work with. Okay. So that tells us that in looking at this sample, the sample mean is 19.57, but the population mean then is going to be somewhere we're 95% confident it's going to be somewhere between 18.37 and 20.78. Okay. So the question also asked then for the size, the, the size of the customer group. Okay. Kind of shuffling my papers around here with my notes. So let's go to the next tab where it says confidence interval mean by size. So I went ahead and created columns here for you, small, medium, and large. The neat thing is once we've created the formula in the small, then we can drag it across and it'll fill in for us. So let's do the first one here. Uh, we're going to do the count if function, and the count if function basically is going to be looking for uh, the size that we're looking at. In this case, we're going to want it to be uh, B4, which would be small. Okay, so count if the equal sign till Excel formula is coming. Referring back to the first one, data, that's our data tab. Now we're going to be using the absolute values again, so we want to make sure we put the dollar sign in. This way we can, when we copy the formula to the to the right, it'll keep those uh, positions for us, okay? Okay, so that's the range. Then we're going to want the criteria. Okay, so we're going to tell it to look in this sheet here, CI mean by size. You see where that's the name of the sheet down here. That's what we're telling it to look at that. Uh, okay, I got to make sure it's a single quote on each side, not a double quote. Give it the exclamation mark and then B4. So I didn't do the absolutes there because we're going to want it to change to C4 then to D4 as we drag it across. Okay, so that's our sample size. Then we're going to do our mean, again, equal average. If we're looking for the data tab again, putting in the absolute values. Now we're going to look for it in B4 and then back to the range again. And it was the same range that we used earlier, which is the data tab. Okay, that gives us a sample mean for that. And then the sample standard deviation, then we're going to use the STDVS. Use an if statement. That's our range that we're looking for. Um, This one's a little different than the other one because it says if it equals B4, you got to do two parens because you had it up, open, and closed. Okay. Oops. Correct. So what did I? Oh, I see. Need three parentheses. Okay, I see what I did. Okay. And standard error of the mean is not as complex. Divided by the square root of B5. Now I'm not using uh, absolutes, the dollar signs on this because I want it to change as I drag it across. Okay. And then degrees of freedom is equal to B5 minus 1. Multiplier then is our T. We're using the this, as you can see up here, it's taking the confidence interval and then our degrees of freedom there for that. Okay. So then our lower limit. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and change these numbers to two decimal places. All right. So if I just highlight this and take the little plus sign and I drag it across all three, and there we have it all entered for those three there. Okay. Uh, so if we look at, let's go ahead and cut and paste the box plot here. Now we can see um, pretty close, you know, let's see on large here, it said our upper limit was 20.39. Our box plot says it was for large. Let's see, it's not, there we go, 22.5. You can see how close we got. And this is just based on the lower was said 15.18, and this one said that, and it said our mean was 18.1. Sample mean was right on. So you can see how doing a box plot beforehand can give you a very similar range. Okay. All right. So I'm going to break this assignment into two videos. And so I'll come back in another video and show you the CI proportion and the CI difference. Okay. Thank you for watching, and I hope this helps.